Hello guys, it's Johnny time, and today we have a super special video which consists of two parts. So we had a chance to get together with the team behind Starkswap. Starkswap is the best and the biggest AMM and decentralized exchange on StarkNet. So in a second we'll get into the interview with the guys, and we will also touch upon the audit that we at GingerSec did for Starkswap for their smart contracts that are written in Cairo. Starkswap is built on StarkNet, and StarkNet is the leading Layer 2 ZK rollup solution on top of Ethereum, and it's known for its unique tech. For example, smart contracts written in the Cairo programming language. StarkNet allows mass scaling and adoption on top of Ethereum on Layer 2 solution, which is decentralized, secured, and based on zero-knowledge rollups. So we will talk with the guys, and in part 2, Gershon, co-founder of GingerSec and our StarkNet Expert, will share how he approached the Starkswap audit and what his methodology when it comes to smart contract auditing, especially Cairo and StarkNet smart contract. So let's get right into it. We are live. So hello guys, welcome aboard, welcome to Johnny Time. And today we have some super special guests, Code Median and Brand Builder, co-founders of Starkswap, and Gershon, my friend and co-founder at GingerSec. So how are you guys?
Doing well, thanks.
Doing
Thanks
pretty good.
us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So it's going to be super interesting conversation. And before we deep dive and start talking about Starkswap and StarkNet and Cairo and all the juicy stuff, so we first want to know better about you guys. What's your background? How did you get into crypto? How did you start with StarkNet? And how did you start build Starkswap?
Yeah, so I mean, we were actually working in the same day job back when we kicked Starkswap off, and we both have some backgrounds in crypto dating back to 2017 or so, and a lot of passion about the space. And we were exposed to StarkNet and thought that what they were building was really cool. And the idea of sort of being able to put together something which is great for customers with better fees, faster transaction speeds was exciting for us, and we just got going and got the ball rolling from there.
Awesome. And how did you found out about crypto, about blockchains? What was your first time that you interacted with blockchains?
Oh, for me, there was a while ago, completely unrelated to the financing world of things. I looked at a thing called sort of dispute resolution in blockchains, trying to automate legal processes, and that was sort of my transitory way into blockchains from a developer perspective. And then from that bandwagon on, the next obvious choice was to start writing contracts and getting involved in the DeFi scene as well.
Awesome. So it's very interesting. And we also have here on the show Gershon, which is a co-founder with me in GingerSec. He is a Cairo professional in StarkNet. He is he knows Cairo. If you wake him in the middle of the night and ask him, how do you write a for loop? Wait, there is no for loop in Kairos. So he will not know how to do it because it doesn't exist. But he's our Cairo StarkNet professional. And he's the guy who made the audit for Starkswap. So Gershon, do you want to introduce yourself? How did you get with crypto?
A little bit overwhelmed by the introduction. Thank you about that. We did the audit for the fellows here at Starkswap. I had a good time doing it, and looking forward to delving into the details in this interview.
Awesome. So we know how you guys got into crypto, but now we want to know, how did you come up with the idea of Starkswap? How did it start? What is the story? You guys met in your day job and let's build something awesome, and how everything went through to starting working on Starkswap?
Yeah, so I guess we started to dive a little bit into StarkNet in general and scoping out like what exists there, what is needed, what's gonna, you know, allow this ecosystem to develop and really bring value to the people that were starting to show interest in this exciting new network. And we realized that, AMM, it's a core primitive, and we decided to start there. And really our focus, I guess, from the get-go has always been around what can we build that's going to make people excited to hop on the protocol and use it and bring them a better experience. Like as DeFi users ourselves, that's always where our mind is at. And so like we started with Starkswap, we later added Iron Fleet, which is a DeFi pooling protocol, which helps users, interact with L1s and share the gas fees. So like both of those things, leveraging StarkNet's cheaper fees, faster speed, is all about making the user experience better. So, I mean, that's always sort of been what's guided us and will continue to guide us as we move forward.
So you guys are DeFi natives. I mean, you guys use DeFi in other chains like Ethereum, maybe Polygon, maybe in other chains, and you like saw the need for like an AMM, like Uniswap, like SushiSwap, something that will be built on StarkNet with the advantages of like the lower fees and the layer twos.
Exactly.
Every network needs an AMM. Like it's a core primitive of any DeFi system and offering. So you will need a way of swapping tokens, and that's obviously a good place to start. And since Starknet is a new thing where the playing ground is still level and there's no majority player like Uniswap on Ethereum, for example, it's still a nice way to start and try and establish ourselves with that as a foundation.
Yeah, very interesting. And you guys are also building some like advanced AMM that combines Uniswap for like the normal AMM, and then you have also Curve for stable swaps and another AMM formula for like stable swaps. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. It's actually already built. We're like super excited about this launch we've got planned for March 1st. And yeah, like it's looking really good. We're excited to share it with the community.
That's awesome. And so you said that StarkNet is like was interesting for you because of the technology, because of the lower fees. Though there are so many others like alternative EVM chains that the transaction fees are quite low. Like if it's like other forks of Ethereum, like Phantom, for instance, or Polygon, or like now there is like Arbitrum and Optimism, optimistic rollups. What made you choose actually Starksnet and not build your DEX or any other EVMs?
Yeah, so I mean, beyond faster speeds, like those other networks also, they have their merits and all that, but StarkNet, because you're essentially able to leverage native ETH security, you're going to be in a better position in terms of trust, in terms of being able to rely on the network. If I'm a user, I'm much more comfortable trusting StarkNet than I am some of these other networks. So for us, it was a natural fit.
And I think it's also important to point out that we personally know the Starkware developers and people, and it's obviously a useful connection to have to be able to talk directly to the network and evolve, hand in hand.
I think jumping in here real quick, also from an auditor's point of view, me and Johnny are in love with StarkNet. We think ZK rollups are the future. It's one of the reasons we as an auditing firm like also decided to focus on this. And we're absolutely in agreement with the Starkswap team. And it's exciting for them to be, I think, one of the very first AMMs and for us to be able to do this audit on this platform, which is we absolutely think is going to be huge.
That's actually a very good point, Gershon. Thanks for pointing it out. Can you please expand a little bit about the difference of security between optimistical rollup and ZK rollups, and why we chose to work with StarkNet, and why obviously Starkswap team chose to work with StarkNet?
Are you asking me or the Starkswap team?
Whoever wants to take the mic.
Okay. I'll let the Starkswap team go first.
All right.
Nah,
I was,
take it, Gershon.
I was gonna say you're the security expert. You gotta answer this one.
So the question is about ZK rollups versus optimistic rollups. So I don't remember specifically where I read it, but I remember it was somebody either from Optimism or from Arbitrum or somebody like who's very core within Ethereum, and they said that like they think all the optimistic rollups are going to have to pivot to being ZK rollups. There was just like 2 years in there, I think from 2020 or 2021. Like there were 2 years in there where there were just like leaps and bounds with zero knowledge technology. Whereas all of a sudden it became possible to realistically run Turing complete software and produce a ZK proof of it. Not getting too much into technical details because it is quite complex. It's just on all aspects, it's just way better. Like it's faster than optimistic rollups. It's more secure than optimistic rollups. Yeah, it's just a matter of time before they eat up their lunch money completely, I think.
So you guys are all in ZK rollups, and you are quite sure that they're gonna take over optimistic rollups. Am I right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think a interesting question would be why StarkNet versus some of the other ZK rollups. There's there's one by Polygon that they wanna release, and there's another one. I'm forgetting the name. It's kind of embarrassing that I'm forgetting the name, but it's called. Anybody help me?
ZK Sync.
ZK Sync.
ZK Sync, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
for us, part of our thought process there was about the fact that, like, first of all, we know the StarkNet guys, so that's like, that extra vote of confidence, and also like the math is hard, right? And they're such a strong team that we really felt like if there's a team that can pull this off, it's them. And I think that they're proving that to be the case.
that's very important, actually, that the ecosystem, the blockchain itself supports developers that will come and build protocols on the blockchain. And it's very good to hear that you guys have this support from the StarkNet team. Awesome. So actually, talking about like deploying on StarkNet, it's not that obvious, because when you like create an AMM on, let's say, Phantom or Polygon, both of the blockchains use EVM and Solidity, but when you deploy to StarkNet, it's much more challenging because they have their own compiler and own programming language called Cairo. So I would like to ask you guys, what are the biggest challenges that you faced while developing Starkswap on StarkNet, and how is it different from like creating an AMM on other EVM chain?
I think the biggest challenge was obviously that it's a new system, it's unproven. By the time we jumped on it, it was still actively developed. There was no developer tooling around it, no good ways of testing. So everything you sort of expect from an ecosystem that is established isn't there. A lot of the things that we did for our products, we were the first to try it, sort of deploying a L1, L2, a product that talks between L1 and L2 hadn't been deployed, and a lot of the things that we needed for that were just not documented or hidden deep in the code, or we needed to talk directly to Starkware to understand how they intended it. So there was a massive barrier to actually getting code written and code out. And I think the interesting thing is that the language model of Cairo with their immutable memory is also a different paradigm to programming. So it's sometimes a little bit different to think about a Cairo program that you would think of a Solidity or similar language to write code in.
I think if anything, that makes it very exciting. It's like the early days of Ethereum. Nothing is very well documented. I think probably, I don't know specifically when you started developing this app. I know when we started doing the audit for you, but like the language changed there like 2 or 3 times. It's on the precipice of changing again. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my point of view, if anything, that's like makes it very exciting. Like you feel like you're a pioneer or something.
It is exciting, but it is also painful to rewrite your your software every couple of months.
Exciting and painful at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember the early
It's
days
like
of like
every time you
EVM
open up your
development.
project, you've got to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, every time you open up your project to, like, a day pass, you're ready to get into the code again, and you've got to, like, upgrade all of your dependencies because there's been, like, version upgrades for everybody, and it's breaking changes across the board, and it's pretty insane,
Oh my
but it's a
God.
lot of fun, too.
That sounds horrible and fun.
That sums it up.
Yeah, so actually regarding security in EVM, it's still EVM considered and Solidity considered new. We still don't even have 1.0 in Solidity. It's still 0.8. We still don't have like version 1. So I imagine how Cairo is new compared to Solidity and to EVM. And the reason that there are so many security vulnerabilities and exploits in DeFi and EVM is because there is because it's new, it's still not very battle tested, and still there are billions of dollars deployed loan to total value lock on protocols, on DeFi protocols and on marketplaces. And I think with Cairo, the security part is even more challenging because it's even newer technology, newer language with less documentation, with less experience out there about security vulnerabilities. And if you think about it, I think the only reason that we don't see a lot of like exploits at the moment in like Starknet is because it's still like kind of like the TVL is quite low. There is no like minute, but once the TVL will get bigger and bigger, the security there will be like a must.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing to add is that Cairo is or at least Cairo 0. Before the Regenesis 1.0 release, it's a very low level language. It's almost comparable to an assembly language over a high level language. And that makes a lot of the writing code and making sure that the reasoning over your code a lot harder than it does for languages that are targeted or designed with a sort of security focus in mind.
Yeah, 100%. I'll jump in and I'll say that, like any good startup, the Starkware team definitely moved fast and broke things. Just off the top of my head, I can think of two major security flaws that were introduced just because their documentation wasn't quite there. One, we actually wrote an article about, and we alerted the community. It was like a known issue, but at the time there wasn't enough attention to it. There was we could link to the article as well. Just something that exists in, I think, 80% of the contracts that we saw. Another vulnerability that was introduced, again, just because the Starkware team is moving fast and breaking things, and again, I have nothing but respect for them. It's how startups work. They got to be battle tested before they become truly secure. Is that they just had like deprecated calls that were still available on mainnet, and that introduced another really major bug. So I think just like with any system, like battle testing is the best recipe for security. And I think just being on par with the community and like reading up on all the updates, being part of the forums and all this is important, specifically at the early stage that StarkNet and StarkX and whatever else is released by Starkware is at right now.
I think it just underlines the importance of involving people like yourselves to, help you go over your stuff again and find things you may have become blind to because you've looked at it for countless hours.
Definitely, and again, like I have nothing but respect for the StarkNet team, but programmers make mistakes, as we all know.
Exactly.
Programmers and admins with EOA accounts with private keys. So in Starknet there are no EOA accounts, but there is still like permissions and ownable contracts, and we always make mistakes. We are human beings. It's still not Chat GPT or GPT 3 or 4 that is writing the contracts and controlling the keys.
Yeah,
I think there will
ChatGPT knows Solidity, but it still doesn't know Cairo. We tried.
Still not know Cairo.
I think it would make more bugs than most people.
Definitely. So that's why we decided actually to step into Cairo and StarkNet early on, because we believe in the ecosystem and we think that security will be like a default need now and in the future. It's better to start including security in the development process and before even it's deployed on mainnet and there is like huge TVL at risk. Okay, that's super interesting. And I would like to ask you guys, what differentiates Starkswap from other DEXs? Because there are also other DEXs in the DeFi space, in other blockchains, and also there are other DEXs on StarkNet. So I would like to learn about your secret sauce. What's going to make Starkswap the best and biggest AMM on StarkNet? And in general, maybe even, in DeFi Llama, the top one will be Starkswap, we hope.
Yeah, one day, right? So yeah, I'll try to talk about that a little bit. So we essentially have this unique BYOC backbone that Starkswap is built on top of, and BYOC stands for Bring Your Own Curve. So obviously, it's a riff on Bring Your Own Beer. We're DeFi geeks, so instead of bringing beer, we bring curves. Sometimes we bring beer also. Yeah, so like pretty much the idea here is that it allows us to bootstrap a new curve on top of the existing system trivially. So Starkswap is really, really flexible. So today we support the XYK curve and also the stable curve. You mentioned that earlier, Johnny. And in the future, we can essentially introduce a new curve without breaking the existing contracts, which we think is quite exciting. We were playing around with the idea of introducing a like random curve for gambling purposes. Like there's all sorts of fun gimmicky stuff you could do, or also, novel math that might really result in lower slippage trades. So we're excited about that. We think it does differentiate Starkswap from, other DEXs on StarkNet and, from other DEXs generally as well. So yeah, that's where we stand with that.
That's super interesting. But for our beginners, newcomers, can you please explain a bit about what does the curve means and how it affects like the AMM, the formula, the automated market maker? What's the difference between XY equals K and X 3X, 3Y? And what's the difference?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, without getting, into technical details, the result for you as a user is that the math determines how much, how worthwhile your trade's going to be. So like if you input, say, 5 USDC into a trade, how many USDT can you expect to come out the other side, right? So obviously this is impacted by the volume in the pool and by, primarily by the math aside from that. So a stable curve. Yeah, exactly. The liquidity in the pair. So like the math is really what determines how worthwhile the trade's going to be, in confluence with the liquidity. So stable curve is designed to essentially output better trades with lower slippage for, tokens that are pegged to the same price. So, USD pegged tokens, for example. Volatile curve doesn't have that feature. And, I think there will be new curves discovered in the future, which might introduce exciting new properties, which we haven't thought of yet.
Thank you. Comedian, did you want to say anything about it?
I just wanted to add that we have an amazing team and great UX, which obviously differentiates us from everybody else.
Yeah,
that's the most important.
I really like the UX and the story around like Game of Thrones, all the theme.
We do as well.
That's awesome. So how do you see like in terms of the future of DeFi, like, because we had like initially we had like AMMs and we have lending protocols and now we have derivatives and there's like so many blocks built on top of another. So how do you see like the future of DeFi and how is Starkswap going to take part in this future?
And I can give you my 2 cents on this, right? Because it's obviously very subjective. I've got a background in traditional financial markets, And if you compare DeFi with traditional markets, DeFi is far away from replacing them, both from a volume perspective, from a transaction speed perspective, and from a fees perspective. Like nothing I do in DeFi is anywhere near as efficient as I can do it in the traditional markets. And in order for DeFi to actually succeed in the long run in the space that traditional markets are in right now, we will have to significantly reduce transaction fees and increase transaction speed. StarkNet is one step towards that direction, right? So by building a system on that essentially gets us closer to where traditional markets are, I think we make a huge step in the right direction. If there's, the more we develop on it, the more new products and new ideas will come out that potentially supersede or improve on existing, monetary system equivalents. But I think the biggest benefit will be to get closer to the efficiencies of the traditional markets.
Definitely. So DeFi is still in its beginning stage, and we are far away in terms of comparison of volume and liquidity to traditional finance market, and StarkNet and Starkswap is going to take a big part in the mass adoption of DeFi, as I believe.
So do we. That's why we've bet on it.
I think also other features within StarkNet that obviously are available on Starkswap, given that it's on the StarkNet, such as account abstraction, are huge and in terms of UX. In order for really making it aside from just the speed of transactions and gas fees, I think also just the usability. I think it's not really relevant to this conversation what account abstraction is specifically, but UX from the user's perspective on StarkNet is just majorly better than it is on EVM. Correct me if you think otherwise.
I agree. It's more flexible, which allows you to provide better products.
Yeah. So because right now, every time you want to send a swap, you need to confirm this pop-up of your MetaMask wallet. Or right now it's going to be in StarkNet, maybe Bravos or Argent. But in the future, the UX also going to be so much smoother. Yeah. Okay, guys, so we are here for Alpha. Could you guys please share a bit about your upcoming releases, features, roadmaps? What are you guys busy with? What can we expect coming soon?
Yeah, so we mentioned this earlier, but we've got plans to launch Starkswap V1, we're calling it, on testnet on the 1st of March. So what we've had until now, I guess, could be called Starkswap, V0, and V1 is a totally rewritten app. So it's a brand new UI, which we think is just so much prettier than the one that's currently up there. We got a whole ton of new backend features. So we've got Oracle built into contracts. We've got better router. We've got factory for creating new pairs dynamically, so users can do that now. Flash loans, this whole cool BYOC architecture we talked about. We've got a developer SDK, which is going to be shipping. And so all of this stuff is coming up soon. And I guess once we get this thing out on testnet, we're going to probably shift gears towards mainnet launch and the Regenesis and Cairo 1.0. We're probably not going to launch on mainnet prior to the Regenesis because there's some architectural, I guess, inefficiencies that we would go for, things that aren't quite ideal, in order to sort of allow ourselves to launch the current contracts and then shift post Regenesis. So we prefer to wait for Cairo 1.0 and then do it properly the first time. But we'll have to see sort of how Starkware progresses with Cairo 1.0 and sort of how the ecosystem adapts before we're able to commit to a hard date for that launch.
That's great news. So all the features that you mentioned are already developed using Cairo 1.0, or it's the previous version of Cairo?
It's written in the old version. We've started with the 1.0 rewrite. Yeah, so we've converted a few of our contracts, the smaller ones, to 1.0 just as a POC. But last I checked was a week ago. You couldn't deploy it yet. So we're still waiting for that to actually, kick off to the point that we can actually deploy our contracts and test them. And the Starkswap contracts themselves, we started converting, but it's a huge change. Like, there's a lot of work to convert things, and it's not quite ready yet. So a lot of things that we would want from 1.0 don't yet work as they are, I think, intended. So that's still gonna take a while. And just to sort of reiterate what was said, if you want to deploy to mainnet with a pre-1.0 version, you have to make your contracts upgradable. And we strongly believe that we don't want our pairs, which is essentially where all the liquidity of our users is held, to be upgradable. That should be an immutable thing. And we don't want the code that is behind that liquidity to change in the future, which is the biggest reason why we chose not to go for a pre-1.0 deployment and upgradable contracts.
I gotta say, from a security standpoint, that makes total sense. Just ask Johnny how many times he found stuff on Code Arena that was specifically about upgradable features. I think even in there were at least one or two hacks that I remember in the Open Zeppelin contracts with upgradability. Upgradability is not an easy business. Just ask Johnny. He knows all about it.
An easy business. Also, it's a matter of trust, because you know, when you have like some private keys that control these upgradable contracts, what happens if one of the keys getting hacked, or one of the I'm not saying that this is your case, guys, but one of it's trust for the users. They don't want the founders to go drain the contracts and go to the Bahamas, right? So this, or even exactly. Like, you know, it's a machine. Completely. Eventually, when you like make upgradable contracts, you are downgrading the decentralization and trust to Web 2 security, because if the machine that holds the private key gets hacked, of course there are multi-sigs and solutions, but still you downgrade your security and trust to Web 2. And we really appreciate the fact that you don't want the per smart contract to be like upgradable, because it would be horrible, because this is the contract that holds all the liquidity and all the assets, and it's a huge like concern.
Exactly. That's how we see it.
Yeah, it's like what's the point of writing these? Like, what's the point of writing these new fancy contracts on this new fancy network that's super secure if you then go and introduce upgradability? It's like, come on, let's just do it properly the first time.
Yeah, definitely. You guys mentioned the developer SDK also, that is also in your roadmap and going to be published soon. So could you please bring us some light on what is the developer SDK, why it's big, and how does it work?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's a JS package. We actually originally forked it from the Uniswap SDK, which I think a lot of projects have done. And then we had to like adopt this to work with StarkNet contracts and all that. And we're pretty confident in it now. It lets you interact with Starkswap contracts, make, API calls, all that good stuff. And we're actually using it in our new front end. So it's pretty battle tested at this point, at least, from an internal testing perspective. And quite soon, the entire community is going to get their hands on code that is running on top of it. So developers should have a pretty clean and smooth experience. And it's going to let you, build on top of our contracts, run all sorts of cool stuff, whatever strikes your fancy.
All right, that sounds cool. What kind of things the developers can do with this SDK? How does it help them in the development process? And how is it going to scale up Starkswap and Starknet?
Well, it's a JS SDK, right? So it's mostly going to be for, I don't know, let's say you're a trader that wants to build some sort of trading algorithm on top of Starkswap. Easy. That's, I guess, the main use case, but maybe code meeting. Can you think of another one?
Well, I think if you want to write arbitrage bots, you probably would use the SDK instead of querying the contracts all the time, which I think is a huge market that without arbitrage, no DEX or no market maker can work. So that's a huge thing that needs to happen in the ecosystem. Wallet integration and similar things as well. So I think the SDK will help with that, but it's not a must.
Yeah, so arbitrageurs are making money, but they're also stabilize the ecosystem. They make sure that traders actually can buy tokens in fair prices. So if the token goes up in one blockchain, it makes sure that on Starkswap, the liquidity will be balanced and the token price will be similar. So they're actually giving service to the community, and you guys are helping the arbitrageurs and the developers to ride this kind of top bots on top of Starkswap. So the liquidity and the prices will be more efficient. So I definitely see the value of this SDK and excited about it. All right. So actually, also the most of the volume I think is also by arbitrageurs and algo traders. So it's another thing that will help to increase the fees. It's another thing that just thought of. So increase the fees and the trading volume for Starkswap. So it's actually another advantage. Could you please tell us a bit the Starkswap community? You have a huge Discord channel and a lot of followers on Twitter. How do you guys engage with the community, and how do you encourage contributions like developments, bug bounties, people that will spread the word, testing your product on testnet? How do you guys take all this community thing into consideration?
Brian's the community guy. Go for it.
I can answer. So yeah, so we've run like a bunch of regular events on Discord. So like if you've tuned into the server, you might have seen that. So like we've had events where people can win roles based on participation in the testnet. We did that for the first version of Starkswap. We've done that for Iron Fleet. We're going to have another event for Starkswap V1. Can't share details about that yet. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. Like there's been a lot of engagement from the community. We've had thousands and thousands of participants. I think for Iron Fleet, we hit, I want to say 15,000 unique participants in the Iron Fleet event, which was pretty cool. We actually introduced a ton of load on StarkNet, which was quite exciting. Like it noticeably slowed the network. So to see that kind of engagement and excitement about the product was definitely really, really cool. And yeah, I mean, the community is the heart of any DeFi protocol, right? Without community, without engagement, without passion for what you're building, you're not going to succeed, and you're not going to build anything of value. So, like, we're super grateful for everybody in Discord, everybody on Twitter, everybody that's come forward with ideas, and we do listen, and we're happy you're with us.
Yeah, that's awesome. Actually, it's pretty impressive that you were able to, your community grew so much and it's super active. And I think it's very important for every project, especially DeFi and in something such new, such as AMM on ZK rollup blockchain. It's huge, actually, what you guys are building. And the fact that you were able to collect so many people to the community it just shows how many people believe in this product and want to take part in it, like in the future of it. So it's amazing. And now I'm going to ask a bit hard question, but it's probably the question that is the most being asked in the community. And the question is like, when token? So, so like, Starknet, Starknet announced that they're going to have a token, and we have other DEXs and AMMs. Uniswap have their own token, SushiSwap have their own token. So is there going to be a token for Starkswap?
Yeah, so there will be a token. There will be a token. We admitted this in December. I think we had like a December roadmap update, and we were like, yeah, there will be a token. I can't say when it's going to happen or what it's going to look like at this point, but I promise you guys there will be a token. So you have to stay tuned to Discord, Twitter. We'll keep the community up to date as we move forward with that.
All right, guys, so there are going to be a token, so make sure to be active in the community. Maybe you will win an airdrop one day. All right, so this is a bit like technical question. Can you please, guys, walk us through the security measures that Starkswap has in place to ensure the safety of the funds of the user? What kind of mechanism did you implement? How did you approach the smart contract development process? And how do you take security, and what do you do for security? And also, I would like you, Gershon, later to add some details about the audit that we have done, and how do you look at Starkswap security and Cairo security in general?
And I think the way we approached it was to look at established AMMs. And the most established AMM that we know, or that probably everybody knows about, is Uniswap. So we went to the Uniswap contracts and we read through them, tried to understand what exactly they do, which mechanisms they have to provide security measures all around. And one of the things that they do, which I really liked, is to essentially limit the pair itself to the minimum logic possible. So the pair only does what it absolutely needs to do, and is immutable, and all the other logic stays outside of the pair. So we followed that paradigm. We've implemented everything that Uniswap has in terms of security as well. We did look at the Solidity implementation, but Solidity, as people know, it didn't go so well. So we took some of the things that Solidity had, which we thought were improvements in terms of Oracle pricing, over how Uniswap do it in their contracts.
With the swaps.
Uniswap, but overall, it's mostly Uniswap inspired. Right? Pardon?
So Uniswap is working with TWAPs, time weighted average price. You guys are implementing the same mechanism, or you're implementing something else?
It's the same mechanism, but done slightly differently.
All right.
If I give some of my input, I think the Starkswap team, even if they weren't looking at me and listening to me right now, I'd say the same. I think what I liked is, as they said, they implemented whatever changes they did do very minimally. I think, as we said before, security is all about keeping it simple and being battle tested. The best systems are so-called anti-fragile. And anti-fragility only comes from being battle tested and being simple. So they definitely did a good job on that. I think one of the main features they did introduce was the custom formulas for the K, and we audited the crap out of them. We made sure they're strictly as they are on more battle-tested systems. We also did formal verification for the core contracts, as you'd see in the next part, and we're pretty confident. We're pretty confident in this. I'd put my own money on Starkswap.
Yeah, I'll just add, like you were saying, like you're happy about the contract. Like it's been a pleasure working with you guys. Like I think, like, just a shout out to the Ginger security team. You've been immensely helpful, identified some issues, and just been a great process all around.
Agreed.
Thank you. We enjoyed it as well.
We enjoyed it as well. And my take on this is, yeah, always look at like battle-tested protocols. And if someone did it and it wasn't hacked, probably it works until it hacks, but it's better to learn from the best. And if you create your own features or your own developments, then it's better to get an audit or someone that is like, that can take a look at your code and don't look at it from the developer eye, but more from like a hacker of like, how can I attack this new feature of like the BYOC, right? BYOC, build your own curve. Yeah. BYOC, which sounds like interesting in terms of security, because it might introduce like a lot of bugs and new unexpected behavior of the state of the smart contract. And that's exactly what you guys did. So I think that the users can rest assured that their funds are in good hands. So that's the most important thing.
And good code.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. So before we finish, do you guys want to announce anything, to promote anything to your community, something that you want to tell them?
I think we shared everything we've got, about the upcoming launch. So they'll have to stay tuned for more as we move forward.
All right, guys. So thank you so much for being here and answering all these questions. It was super interesting. And I wish you the best of luck with Starkswap, that it will be deployed and the loan to value is gonna go higher and higher until the ceiling of DeFi Llama will break. And we will be in touch, right? So if it's like talking about StarkNet, about like helping you guys with the security, and it's gonna be super interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Excited for what's to come.
Yeah, for sure.
Hello everybody, Gershon here with GingerSecurity, and today we'll be showing you how we audited Starkswap, one of the biggest, if not the biggest AMMs on StarkNet. So for that, I've got my StarkNet t-shirt here, I've got my crypto coffee mug, and I think we're ready to audit. So let me, first of all, exit this Loom screen and go over to where I do the coding stuff. Okay, so we've been asked by the Starkswap team to audit their Starkswap contracts repo, which you can find if you go to GitHub. Let me open it up for you. GitHub, Starkswap contracts. And we've been tasked specifically with a commit beginning with a CFEE, this one right over here. Okay, so I just so happen to have this git commit over here ready on my desktop, or not my desktop, on my machine. And let's fire up Visual Studio Code, and begin talking about this. So before we jump into any audit, what we have to consider is, what is this project? Sometimes a client might even tell us they're more concerned about a specific area of the code more than another. So we have to consider all of these things. For this one specifically, it's an AMM, pretty standard. For this specific audit, there wasn't a specific area that the client was more or less concerned about. Obviously, like with any audit, asset manipulation is the most severe, or anything anything that would allow an attacker to either grief, manipulate assets, or do any kind of denial of service attack, whether it's temporary or permanent. So there wasn't a specific area of the code. It was like the whole code that we were looking at. So when I dive into an audit, what I do is I simply read the code top to bottom, bottom to top. I read the docs. I talk to the team. Coming originally from Web 2 security background, this is one thing I do very much like about smart contract auditing, is that the code is, even if it's a huge project, the code base is usually quite small. So in this video, I won't actually show you line by line, like how I looked at the code and the kind of notes that I took. I would very much encourage you, if you're somebody trying to get into security auditing, or you're already a security auditor, but maybe you're trying to get into StarkNet. Specifically, again, this is a StarkNet project, different language. We'll talk about that in a bit. I would encourage you to open up maybe the same repo, maybe even the same commit, and just try to follow along. But again, I won't get into specifics. I'll just tell you generally what I did, and you can do it yourself. Pause the video if you need to, do it yourself if you want. So specifically for the sake of this video, I'm going to dive into what is the most important contract in this project, which is the pair contract. Okay. So as you can see, Cairo, very different language than Solidity, which most of you are familiar with. In addition, this is an older version of Cairo. So as you can see, the comments here are with a hashtag instead of a // So even Visual Studio is not rendering this correctly, but this is the code we were given, and this is the code we have to work with. So let's say we're reading this contract. Again, we're going to be reading everything top to bottom, bottom to top a couple of times. The goal is to get as familiar with the code as somebody on the Starkswap team is. So let's say I'm reading this code. So what I would do is, again, read it top to bottom first of all. And let's say there's something that I'm not sure about, or a line of code that either like seems a little suspicious to me, I don't understand why they did something there, I'm asking myself a question. So what I would do, I would use one of 4 tags, okay? And so I would actually do a comment, either a / as it is in the current Cairo version, or a hashtag as it was in the older one. And then I would do @audit, okay? Audit means that's like a note that I take for myself as the auditor. There's 4 tags that I personally use, and I would recommend you do as well. There's audit, there's audit audit info, there's audit OK, and audit issue. And you can see that Visual Studio Code, if you download an extension by the name of I think it's called Solidity Visual Developer. We'll definitely link to it in the description below. You'll get Visual Studio Code to create those little tabs on the left-hand side for you. Okay, so what I would do, I would go line by line. If I have a question for myself, I would write audit. This line seems suspicious. Is an overflow possible here? For example, okay? If it's something that is not a question that so audit would be for questions that I'm asking myself. If it would not be a question that I'm asking myself, and just like something perhaps I think the team did not do a good enough job of documenting something, and I want to document it for my own purposes in my own language, okay? I would do an audit info. This is a swap from token A to token B. The fee is taken before the function is called. For example, so this is audit and audit info, all right? So what I would do is I would try to answer all of my questions. I would go over the code 5 times if needed, look at the docs, whatever, to make sure that everything I have is either an audit info, or if it was an audit, that I've answered it. Once I've answered it, it becomes audit OK. For example, if I see that, for example, a line was suspicious and I thought an overflow was possible, but then I figure out, I read the docs and I see that an overflow is indeed possible, but is desired, as is sometimes the case, I would write audit OK. I would convert the comment to an audit OK. Okay, and then I would write the reason why it's okay now. An overflow is desired here. See link, and then I would paste the link here. Paste link here. Okay. So after I've read the code a couple of times, I would get to a point where I either answered all of my audit tags, or I've gotten a really good understanding of the code, okay, as it is. And now maybe I'm ready to do a deeper dive into my audits that I was not able to answer. For those of you curious, once I, for example, figure out that an audit issue that I thought was possible is indeed an issue, I would mark it as audit issue, obviously. All right, so enough with general statements. Let's consider Starkswap specifically. So if you were following along offline and actually reading the code, you would soon discover that this code is almost an exact copy of Uniswap v2. As many projects are, they're simply forks of similar well-known projects onto a different chain. This case, in my opinion, is particularly interesting because it's a fork, but in a different language on a completely different platform, that platform being StarkNet. So I think what would be important right now is for us to compare, okay? Because Uniswap is very battle tested. It's it's dealt over $1 trillion in swaps. Okay, last time I checked on Dune Analytics. So it's very battle tested. If we see that the functionality is one-to-one the same as Uniswap is, and of course that's not an easy task, we can be we can assume that it's pretty safe. So next thing on the list, after we've considered the code, we've read it line by line, maybe we have a few possible leads for issues. Next thing to do would be to open up Uniswap v2. I just so happen to have it here downloaded as well, so let's open up Visual Studio Code for it. And again, if you want to, pause the video, try to do the same as I'm doing here. If you were to go over the Uniswap code, and there's a lot of guides online that explain it very well, you would see that the structure is very, very similar. Just like we have a pair contract, a Starkswap v1 pair.Cairo, there's a Uniswap v2 pair, which is the contract, again, responsible for pair vaults. It is in and of itself an ERC20. It's got to give you a LP token, and it manages the swaps from token A to token B. So next thing I would do, and that we actually did, would be to go function by function, okay, contract by contract, line by line, and see where the differences are, okay? In order to show you a more concrete example, let me show you we forked the GitHub repo for Starkswap where we had our actual comments. So let me show you the comments that we actually had during our audit. So I'll fire up another Visual Studio Code window over here. And as you can see, there's a ton of those. Here again, we're on Starkswap v1 pair. There are a ton of those. There's audits, there's audit infos, stuff, notes that I took down for myself. Everything that was one-to-one, as is with Uniswap, I actually linked either to the Uniswap docs or to the actual Uniswap repo. I don't think you can see it over here, but in other areas of the code, there are links, as there is over here, to the actual Uniswap repo, which when I actually went over the code, helped me understand the code better and also see where the differences may lie. Because again, this is a fork. If it's one-to-one functionality-wise, not code-wise, functionality-wise, and I'll get to the difference in a bit. If it's one-to-one functionality-wise, as with Uniswap v2, then it should be safe. So let's recap what we did so far. We looked at the code, we understood it very well. We looked at the Uniswap code, and we understood that very well too. And right now we have a lot of notes. We have a good understanding of the Starkswap code. We have a good understanding of the Uniswap code. So the next step, in my opinion, would be to have a very good understanding of StarkNet itself. Now, why is that? So a minute ago, I mentioned that there is a difference between functionality and code. The code might be exactly the same, especially when you're talking about a fork that is on an EVM chain. For example, if the Starkswap team, instead of doing an AMM on Starknet, they did it on Polygon, for example, which of course is a EVM chain. You know, maybe the code would have been one-to-one the same as Uniswap. Does that mean that functionality-wise it's the same? Not necessarily. So every chain, even if it's EVM, might have certain functions that it implements a little bit differently. Specifically, Polygon, for example, has callbacks on native tokens. If I transfer a native token on Polygon, it would allow me to do a callback. We've seen this in the wild. This has been an attack vector, okay, for for projects that simply forked an existing project onto a new chain. So even in such similar chains as Polygon and Ethereum, there are differences even for identical code. So for Starknet, it's going to be even more different. So here at Ginger Security, we've dealt with Starknet from day one. Starknet is our bread and butter. But let's say you're newer to Starknet, you want to know where to start. Let's say you're considering a fork on a different chain. So what I would do first and foremost is try to Google things that are specific to the chain you're trying to audit. So there is a very good resource for Starknet specifically, and I'm going to open it up over here. There's this Cairo and Starknet security guide written by a fellow named Control C03. I'm sure that's not his real name. I'm sure that's just a nickname. So also, when I do an audit, even though like we already have more of a acquaintance with and more experience with Starknet and applications on Starknet, I go over this myself as well. So the next thing on the list after we've looked at the code, looked at the Uniswap code, is to look at Starknet specific security measures and issues, and anything really that is worthy of being in this guide. And again, this is just like one guide I pulled up. I can attest that this is a very good guide, and like I'd say the most comprehensive that I've seen on Starknet. But again, like you got to do your research when you do an audit yourself. So again, I'm not going to go one by one over here because there's a lot of things to cover. But what I would say is interesting about Starknet is that it's got or Cairo VM, is that it's got a very different memory model. It's got what they call a read-only or read-once memory model, which I will not explain over here. It's better that you look at a guide. And it's completely different than what you have on EVM. Also, on EVM, you natively support things like uint 256. On Starknet, that's not natively supported. So the next step would be to go over this, understand all of it, go back to your notes, go again line by line, see if there is anything that is applicable to what you've read over here. Again, to recap, we did 3 things so far, that being 1, we looked at the code. 2, we looked at the Uniswap code and compared. 3, we studied Starknet and looked at the code again. Okay, we've done 3 things. By now, I would say we should be Starkswap experts. And now onto the 4th part. The 4th part being, in my opinion, the fun part. The 4th part is the one in which we're going to go bug hunting. Okay, with every project that you ever try to audit, there is quite a steep learning curve depending on the size of the project and how familiar you are with the concepts being introduced. But after some time of getting familiar with the platform and with the code, you get to a point where you really feel as if you were a part of the team and that you really understand the code very well. So after we've done these 3 things, we should be at this level. So the next thing would be to look at all of our audit comments and see if we can actually exploit them. Okay, so specifically with Starkswap, I'll show you a couple. You can look at our report and see like also the more serious issues that we found or the less serious issues that we found. But I'm gonna focus on one issue that we did find because I think it's an interesting case study. So in Starknet, they did have a problem with the uint 256s. Okay, we've also written an article about this, at Ginger Security. Let me show you that article because it's got a good diagram over there. So as I mentioned before, Starknet does not support uint 256s natively. Instead, it has a native support for a integer-sized 252. Okay, the native integer, or not specifically integer, but the native size in Starknet is 248 bits long, which is a very strange number. There is a reason for it if you're reading to Starknet, as you should if you want to audit. It's got something to do with the architecture. Again, we're not going to get into this here, but the native size is 248, which of course a uint 256 has more bits than 248. So what they did at Starknet is they have a uint 256 struct, which has a low 248 bits and has a high 248 bits, totaling 496 bits. Okay, so they use 496 bits, okay, to represent 256. Okay, so by the way, this 248 integer on Starknet is called a felt. You can see that over here, felt. By the way, an article that I very much recommend reading if you want to understand the deeper issue here. It will also be linked, of course. So what happens is that for each such felt, there's two felts in the struct. For each such felt, there's 124 bits that are junk, okay? And they can be manipulated. They can be manipulated to cause some issues. This was a big issue within Starknet, which was later fixed. Okay, so right now this is not something that is applicable to the best of my knowledge to any with a new version with Cairo 1.0. This is not applicable to any Starknet application, but at the time it was. So one thing that we did is we looked over every place where the Starkswap team used a uint 256. And we try to see if the exploit mentioned over here is applicable to their code. And indeed, we found a couple of places where it was applicable, and we got a medium severity vulnerability from it. It was resolved it was resolved very quickly. The Starkswap team was very responsive and very understanding, and it was not anything that would lead to to loss of funds as far as we're concerned. It did require a few other things to go wrong in order for it to lead to a loss of funds, but this is for educational purposes how we were able to find this specific vulnerability. So this about concludes this tutorial. Again, if anybody has specific questions, you're welcome to write it in the comments below, DM us either on Twitter or via email or wherever, Pigeon, whatever you guys prefer. If you have any specific questions, we're all about education. If you want to learn from this case study, we would be happy to help. And yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and hoping to see you in the next one.